In the heart of Chicago, inside the gleaming warehouse of a billion-dollar company, a single moment of cruelty was captured on camera. A celebrated millionaire engineer stood before her staff, mocking a man who had spent his life with grease-stained hands. She laughed, tossed out a challenge meant to humiliate, and the room erupted in jeers. Within hours, the clip spread like wildfire, turning a respected mechanic into the company's joke, a target for ridicule that reached even his own daughter's school. What no one realized was that behind the smirks and whispers, behind the cruelty designed to break him, this man was quietly preparing for something far bigger. Because when you strip away pride, and you corner someone with nothing left to lose, what happens next can shake an entire industry. So the question is, who really ended up laughing in the end? Before we start, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Marcus Reed had never cared for titles, corner offices, or the glossy perks that came with prestige. His life was built around the rhythm of machines, the metallic heartbeat of engines coming apart and roaring back to life under his hands. At 39, he wasn't the kind of man who turned heads in a corporate hallway. His boots carried the stains of years in workshops, his knuckles bore the scars of work done in silence, and his knowledge came not from universities, but from nights spent taking apart discarded engines until he could hear their hidden language. To the outside world, Titan Motors was a cathedral of innovation. Its Chicago warehouse was the pride of the automotive industry, a place where million-dollar prototypes were born under the eyes of celebrated engineers. But for men like Marcus, it was just another floor coated in grease, another set of bolts and wires that needed coaxing into order. He was a mechanic, not a figure the board would ever highlight in glossy brochures. Yet within those walls, Marcus carried something no resume could measure: instinct. A rare gift for seeing what others missed, for finding life in broken machinery when others had given up. His co-workers saw it in small ways. Engines others declared unsalvageable somehow purred again after passing through his hands. Dead machines sputtered to life because Marcus refused to walk away. He wasn't loud about it, never flaunted what he knew. But in the corners of the warehouse, stories circulated of his quiet genius. To some, it was inspiring. To others, it was threatening. Victoria Hale, Titan's millionaire chief engineer, stood firmly in the second camp. She was the face of innovation at the company, a woman whose image was featured prominently in trade magazines and industry conferences. Her rise had been meteoric, fueled by both brilliance and ruthless ambition. She was celebrated, wealthy, and untouchable, or so it seemed. She also carried a disdain for those she believed beneath her, and Marcus, with his lack of degree and his background far from privilege, fit neatly into that category. Tension between them had been building long before the infamous moment of laughter. It started in subtle ways: dismissive comments during staff meetings, a smirk when Marcus offered suggestions, the way she corrected him not for accuracy but to remind the room of hierarchy. At first, Marcus dismissed it. He told himself it didn't matter. His job was to work with machines, not egos. But the contempt lingered, festering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right stage to explode. At home, Marcus lived a very different life. His modest house on the south side was filled with warmth, not wealth. His teenage daughter, Alana, was his pride. She was bright, curious, and already fascinated by the mechanics her father lived and breathed. He often found her in the garage, peering over his shoulder, asking questions about carburetors and circuits. For Marcus, those moments were pure, the reason he kept going even when the warehouse drained him. After losing his wife years earlier, Alana was his anchor, the soul of everything he fought for. Despite the grind, Marcus carried himself with humility. He wasn't naive about the world. He had seen the way people like him, men without pedigrees, men marked by the color of their skin, were often boxed in, given ceilings they weren't meant to break through. But he had also built a quiet resilience. He told himself that if he just kept his head down, did the work, and provided for his daughter, that would be enough. Yet, beneath his steady exterior, there was always the faint hum of unease. He had noticed patterns at Titan Motors. Failed projects seemed to fall hardest on minority employees, while others reaped rewards for work they hadn't truly done. Marcus never said anything aloud. It wasn't his nature, but he stored these observations in the back of his mind like loose screws set aside for later. He didn't know it yet, but those quiet observations would one day prove critical. When the company's $250,000 experimental engine collapsed into failure, the tension that had long simmered suddenly found fuel. For months, Titan's brightest engineers had poured themselves into the design, chasing a dream of extending electric vehicle range by 70%. The result was a disaster. The prototype collapsed in front of investors, leaving reputations bruised and patience thin. Victoria, who had overseen the project, needed a scapegoat, someone who could absorb the frustration, someone disposable. Marcus was the perfect target. He had no degree to shield him, no powerful allies in the boardroom, no glossy credentials to make others pause. What he had was skill, but skill was easy to dismiss when wrapped in the wrong package. The stage was set. The humiliation that would soon spread across Titan Motors and beyond didn't come out of nowhere. It was years in the making. A culture of exclusion had been quietly tightening its grip, and Marcus, unknowingly, was about to be pushed into the center of it. He didn't know it then, but the moment Victoria laughed at him in front of her staff, daring him to fix what her own team of experts had failed to master, would ignite more than just embarrassment. It would unravel a system of deceit, expose sabotage at the highest levels, and transform him from a mechanic mocked in WhatsApp chats to a symbol of something far greater. For now, though, Marcus was just a man trying to hold his dignity in a place determined to strip it away. The laughter didn't end when Victoria Hale mocked Marcus in front of her staff. In many ways, it had only just begun. What started as a cruel remark in the warehouse quickly spread through Titan Motors like gasoline meeting fire. The clip of Victoria's smirk, her biting words, and the roar of laughter behind them traveled across the company intranet. Soon it slipped into private group chats, then out into the wider automotive circle. Each replay was a fresh cut, turning Marcus from a respected mechanic into a spectacle. By the next morning, the jokes had taken shape. In the break rooms, co-workers repeated Victoria's words with exaggerated mockery. On WhatsApp, cruel memes appeared, cartoons of Marcus fumbling with wrenches, parodies of him bowing to Victoria's superior intellect. Some were so vicious they made his stomach twist. Others carried a venom that was harder to shake, dripping with the poison of racism disguised as humor. Marcus had endured disrespect before, but this time was different. This wasn't just a single insult, it was a campaign, a deliberate attempt to strip him of dignity piece by piece. What hurt most wasn't the whispers in the warehouse. It was when one of those memes reached his daughter, Alana. Her classmates shoved it in her face at school, sneering at the image of her father. She came home in tears, her pride in him cracked by the cruelty he hadn't even committed. Marcus promised her he could take it. He told her not to worry. But behind his steady words, something darker stirred. He began cataloging every insult, saving every piece of evidence. He knew instinctively this wasn't just about him. It was about something far bigger. Meanwhile, the failed prototype, the $250,000 engine that had humiliated Titan Motors' best engineers, remained a shadow over the company. 6 senior engineers had spent months designing it, and they'd failed spectacularly. Victoria turned that failure into a stage, declaring that Marcus, the man with no degree, no pedigree, wouldn't do any better. The audience laughed, but Marcus saw something in that engine that others hadn't. Late at night, in his modest garage, he wheeled the broken prototype under the dim light and began taking it apart. His hands moved with the patience of a man who'd spent his life listening to machinery. Every bolt, every gear, every hidden connection, he examined them with obsessive focus. And that's when he saw it. The damage wasn't accidental. Three critical components bare marks no normal failure would leave. Subtle, deliberate flaws had been planted, disguised so well that most experts would never question them. Marcus's chest tightened as the realization sank in. Someone inside Titan Motors had sabotaged the engine. He couldn't carry this alone. He went to Leonard Cruz, his 72-year-old mentor and retired master mechanic. Leonard's sharp eyes studied the parts with the precision of a surgeon. When he finally spoke, his words confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The damage bore the exact hallmarks of corporate sabotage Leonard had witnessed decades earlier. This wasn't incompetence. This was betrayal from within. But how deep did it go? Back at Titan, Victoria's campaign escalated. She created a company-wide WhatsApp group mockingly titled The Miracle Mechanic Show. Every day, she posted sarcastic updates ridiculing Marcus's progress, inviting the entire staff to laugh at his expense. As if that weren't enough, she went on a local Chicago radio broadcast, sneering on air about people who don't know their limits. It wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was destruction, carefully staged for an audience. That broadcast caught the attention of someone unexpected. Dr. Clarissa Monroe, a professor of engineering ethics and a former FBI consultant on industrial sabotage. Her instincts told her that something about this case didn't add up. She sought Marcus out, reviewed the tampered parts, and confirmed without hesitation. The sabotage was real, but she uncovered something even more damning. Digging into Titan's history, Clarissa discovered a chilling pattern. For 6 years, every major failed project at Titan Motors had been placed under the leadership of black engineers or women. When those projects collapsed, their careers collapsed with them. Demotions, firings, reputations left in ruins. Yet the same projects were later revived, polished, and claimed by Victoria Hale and her chosen circle. In each case, Victoria's team reaped promotions, bonuses, and profit shares. Clarissa tallied the numbers. Nearly $1.4 million gained off the wreckage of others. Marcus wasn't just facing personal humiliation. He was standing at the center of a system designed to destroy people like him. Clarissa's words hit him with both clarity and fire. The cruelty wasn't random. The memes, the WhatsApp group, the laughter, it was all part of a strategy. Titan Motors wasn't just mocking him. They were trying to erase him. But fate had one more twist waiting. Victoria, emboldened by her power and wealth, announced a public spectacle. She called it the wedding of the century chief engineer and the mechanic. A Friday event, broadcast live, with employees, clients, and suppliers all invited. To the world, it sounded like playful theater. In reality, it was a trap. Marcus's final humiliation, staged before more than 120 attendees and an industry watching online. For most people, that would have been the end. A career shattered under the weight of ridicule. A man broken by forces too powerful to fight. But Marcus wasn't most people. He had Leonard's wisdom, Clarissa's expertise, and his daughter's unshakable faith. Together, they began building a case, a mountain of evidence that could no longer be ignored. The sabotaged engine parts, the racist memes and WhatsApp threads, the financial records that tied every failure back to Victoria's circle. Each piece was another nail, hammered carefully into the coffin of a system built on sabotage. The warehouse was filling with anticipation for the staged mock wedding, but no one realized a storm was quietly gathering. And when Friday came, the trap Victoria set for Marcus would become the stage for her own downfall. Friday arrived like the gathering of a storm. Inside Titan Motors' warehouse, rows of chairs were neatly arranged, banners hung across steel beams, and a stage had been set as though this were some kind of celebration. Victoria Hale had orchestrated every detail. She wanted the spectacle to sting, to ensure Marcus Reed's humiliation would echo not only inside these walls but across the entire industry. More than 120 people filled the space, employees, suppliers, clients, even a member of the Titan Motors board. Phones were out, cameras ready, live streams rolling. Victoria called it the wedding of the century, chief engineer and the mechanic. Everyone knew it was a cruel joke, but the anticipation in the air was thick, the crowd eager for whatever scene she had planned. Victoria entered in a sharp crimson blazer, her heels striking the floor like a drumbeat. Confidence radiated from her. She moved like a woman convinced of her own invincibility. She took the microphone and laughed, reminding the crowd of her promise. If Marcus could fix the engine that her team of 6 senior engineers had failed to master, she'd marry him. The laughter rippled through the audience again, just as it had in that first warehouse moment. Only now it was bigger, crueler, amplified by the spectacle. When Marcus entered, the mood shifted. He didn't come with swagger or speeches. He came quietly, wheeling in the repaired engine, his expression calm but unshakable. Beside him stood Leonard Cruz, his mentor, and Dr. Clarissa Monroe, the ethics professor who had uncovered Titan's dark history. In the crowd, his daughter Alana sat near the front, her eyes wide with both fear and fierce pride. Victoria smirked, certain of her victory. To her, this was the final act in a play she had already written. But Marcus had brought something she had not anticipated: truth. One by one, the pieces of evidence began to unfold. Marcus started not with bravado but with precision. He explained how he had taken the failed prototype apart, showing the crowd the tampered components. The projector lit up the massive screen behind him with close-up images of the sabotage, the subtle scoring on gears, the deliberate weakening of connections that no accident could explain. The room grew quieter. Then Leonard spoke, his seasoned voice cutting through the tension. He confirmed that the damage bore the unmistakable signs of sabotage he had seen decades earlier. He spoke with the weight of experience, his words carrying a finality no one could dismiss. Clarissa stepped forward next, presenting her investigation. On the screen, document after document appeared: Titan's project history, the records of who had been assigned to which failures, the subsequent promotions and financial windfalls that followed for Victoria and her circle. The numbers told a damning story. $1.4 million siphoned from the wreckage of other people's careers. And then, the most painful revelation of all: screenshots of the WhatsApp groups, the racist memes, the daily ridicule that had turned a man's dignity into a running joke. Alana, trembling but resolute, stood before the crowd and revealed how those images had been used to torment her at school, how the cruelty had spilled from workplace banter into the life of a teenage girl who only wanted to be proud of her father. Her voice cracked, but her courage filled the silence like thunder. Whispers rippled through the audience. Clients exchanged uneasy glances. Employees who had once laughed shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And Jonathan Everett, the Titan Motors board member seated near the front, leaned forward, his expression darkening with every revelation. Finally, Marcus did what no one expected. He turned to the repaired engine, methodically reassembled it before the crowd, and pressed the ignition. The warehouse fell silent. Then the engine roared to life. The sound filled the cavernous space, not with failure but with triumph. And as Marcus explained his modifications, he revealed that the machine didn't just work. It was 20% more efficient than its original design. The very project that 6 senior engineers and months of work couldn't salvage had been restored by the man they had mocked, the man Victoria had tried to erase. The silence broke into chaos. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. For the first time, the crowd wasn't laughing. They were staring at the wreckage of Victoria Hale's carefully built empire. Victoria herself stood frozen, the color draining from her face. The woman who had built her career on sabotage, who had reveled in cruelty, was now watching her power unravel in front of her peers, her clients, and the board. And then came the final blow. Clarissa announced that every piece of evidence had already been submitted to the Department of Justice, to the Illinois Board of Engineers, and to the press. This wasn't just a presentation. It was an exposure, a public unmasking of systemic sabotage and discrimination. Victoria's smirk was gone. Her empire was collapsing in real time. Jonathan Everett rose from his seat, his voice sharp and commanding, ordering Victoria into his office immediately. The crowd no longer cheered her. They no longer followed her lead. Marcus stood steady as the engine purred beside him, his daughter's eyes brimming with tears of pride. For the first time, he wasn't the butt of the joke. He was the man who had turned humiliation into revelation, the man who had forced an entire industry to look in the mirror. And yet, as powerful as this moment was, it was only the beginning. Because exposing corruption is one thing. Surviving the aftermath and reshaping the future is another battle entirely. The warehouse spectacle had ended not with Marcus Reed's humiliation, but with Victoria Hale's undoing. In the hours that followed, the fallout spread like a shockwave through Titan Motors and beyond. By the next morning, news outlets across Chicago were reporting the scandal. Headlines carried words like sabotage, fraud, and systemic discrimination. What had begun as a cruel joke was now a federal case. Within weeks, federal investigators confirmed what Marcus, Leonard, and Clarissa had revealed. Victoria Hale and her closest ally, Eric Dalton, faced charges of fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. The Illinois Board of Engineers suspended their licenses. The Department of Justice launched inquiries into corporate sabotage. The same woman who had once stood on magazine covers as a symbol of innovation was now a pariah. Her name became shorthand for betrayal, a reminder of how power can corrode integrity when left unchecked. But the story didn't end with her downfall. It grew with Marcus's rise. 6 months later, Titan Motors was transformed. Marcus was promoted to Director of Innovation, a title that once seemed unreachable for a man with no degree, no pedigree. Yet he didn't use that position for personal glory. Instead, he built something greater, an inclusive research division, one that paired engineers with mechanics, valuing experience as much as credentials. It was a place where talent was recognized for its results, not for the color of someone's skin or the prestige of their resume. Alana, his daughter, found her own path shaped by those painful months. She earned a full scholarship to study mechanical engineering, determined to carry forward her father's legacy. But she also found her voice as an activist, standing against the very injustices that had scarred her family. For her, the humiliation of those memes became fuel, not to tear others down, but to build a world where dignity couldn't be mocked away. Leonard Cruz, the mentor who had stood by Marcus in his darkest hour, returned to Titan as a senior consultant. His decades of wisdom became a guiding force for a new generation of mechanics and engineers learning to collaborate rather than compete. And Clarissa Monroe accepted a permanent role as an advisor, ensuring that policies were rebuilt from the ground up, that the culture which allowed sabotage and discrimination to thrive would never again take root unchecked. The ripple effects extended beyond Titan Motors. Industry conferences began to question not just the technical failures of companies, but the ethical ones. Discussions about systemic discrimination, about how careers of black engineers and women had been quietly sabotaged for years, began to surface in public forums. Marcus's story became a catalyst, a reminder that behind every failure blamed on the marginalized, there might be a hidden hand pulling the strings. Yet for Marcus, the most profound impact wasn't in the headlines or promotions. It was in the silence of his garage at night, the hum of an engine turning smoothly under his hands, the sound of Alana's laughter filling their home again. He had proven something that went beyond machinery, that dignity, once stripped, can be rebuilt stronger than before, that truth, once revealed, cannot be buried again. Still, the story raises questions that linger long after the roar of that repaired engine faded. How many other careers have been quietly sabotaged? How many voices have been silenced before they could rise? And how many industries still hide behind polished walls while allowing prejudice to fester in the shadows? Marcus Reed's triumph was not just personal, it was universal. It was a reminder that racism in the workplace is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers through dismissive smirks, spreads through group chats, or hides in manipulated failures designed to erase opportunity. But when exposed, when met with courage and truth, it can crumble no matter how powerful the architect. And so, the man once mocked as a joke became a symbol of resilience. His story was featured in Business Insider under the headline, "From Grease-Stained Hands to Industry Leader, the Rise of Marcus Reed." Yet Marcus himself never saw it as revenge. For him, victory was not about destroying his enemies, but about building something lasting, something so undeniable that those who tried to break him became irrelevant shadows in history. The story of Marcus Reed asks us to look closer, to ask ourselves, how many failures are really failures, and how many are the result of systems designed to ensure certain people never succeed? How many times have we laughed at someone else's expense, not realizing the cruelty behind the joke? And what role do we play in either fueling injustice or dismantling it? Because in the end, this story isn't just about a mechanic, an engineer, or a single company in Chicago. It's about every workplace, every institution, every moment where power decides who gets to rise and who is pushed down. The question is not whether racism still exists in these spaces. The question is, what will we do when it shows its face? Marcus's journey proves that the truth can roar louder than any engine. The only question left is, when it's your turn to confront injustice, will you stay silent or will you rise? Marcus Reed's journey reminds us that dignity and truth can outlast even the cruelest injustice. But his story also asks a question that lingers. How many others are still being silenced in workplaces, schools, or communities every single day? If the story moved you, if it made you reflect on the quiet battles people face, then don't let it stop here. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach the world.